Okay, let's keep reading. The first thing the doctor asked Dab-Dab when he reached home, "Is Jib here yet?" "No, I haven't seen him," Dab-Dab said. "Please let me know the moment he comes in," the doctor said as he hung up his hat. "Don't be long washing up," Dab-Dab said. "Lunch is on the table." Just as we sat down to lunch in the kitchen, we heard a racket at the front door. I ran to open it. It inbounded Jib. "Doctor," he cried, "come to the library quick, just you and Tommy." Inside the library with the door closed, Jib asked the doctor to lock it with the key and make sure no one is listening at the window. "It's all right," said the doctor. "Now, what is it?" "Well, doctor," said Jib, gasping from running, "I know all about the hermit. I have for years, but I couldn't tell you because I swore to Bob that I would keep the secret." "Are you going to tell me now?" "Yes," said Jib. "We've got to save him. I followed Bob's scent when I left you in the marshes. I found him and asked if I could tell you now. Maybe you can do something." "Well, for heaven's sake, go on," the doctor said, nearly shouting. "What is the mystery? What has happened? Where is the hermit?" "He's in Puddleby jail," Jip said. "In prison?" "Yes." "What's he done?" Jip went to the door and smelled the bottom to see if anyone was listening. He walked back to the doctor and whispered, "He killed a man." "Lord preserve us," the doctor said, falling into a chair and wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "When did he do it?" 15 years ago in a Mexican gold mine. That's why he's been a hermit ever since. He shaved his beard and kept people away, living alone with Bob on the marshes so he wouldn't be recognized. Last week, these policemen came to town. They heard that a strange man lived alone in the shack and got suspicious. People had been hunting all over the world for the man who did that killing. The policeman went to the shack and recognized Luke by a mole on his arm, took him straight to prison. "Who would have thought it? Luke the philosopher," the doctor murmured, "killed a man? I can't believe it." "Unfortunately, it's true," Jip said, "but it wasn't his fault. Bob says so. He was there and saw it all. He was scarcely more than a puppy. Bob says Luke couldn't help it. He had to do it." "Where is Bob now?" the doctor asked. "He's at the prison. I wanted him to come see you, but he won't leave the prison while Luke's there. Please come down there, doctor, and see what you can do. The trial is at 2 o'clock this afternoon. What time is it now?" 10 past 1. "Bob says they'll kill Luke for punishment if they can prove he did it, or at least send him to prison for the rest of his life." "Of course I'll come," said the doctor, getting up to go, "but I'm afraid there is not much I can do to help, and yet," his face turned thoughtful, "I wonder." Then he opened the door and headed out with Chip and me following. As we hurried out the door, Dab-Dab gave us some pork pies wrapped up to eat on the way for lunch. And when we got to Puddleby Courthouse, next door to the prison, a huge crowd surrounded the building. I hung on to the doctor's coattails as he marched through the mob and safely into the jail. "I want to see Luke," he said to a guard standing at the door. Outside the door of Luke's cell, Bob, the bulldog, wagged his tail sadly when he saw us. At first I couldn't see anything, it was so dark. After a while I saw a low bed against the wall underneath a small window with bars. On the bed sat the hermit, staring at the floor, his head resting on his hands. Okay, and here's a picture for you. It's been a while. Can you see it? Okay. "Well, Luke," the doctor said, "they don't give you much light in here." Very slowly the hermit looked up. "John Dolittle, what brings you here?" "I've come to see you. I only just heard about it, and I would have come sooner. I went to your hut to ask if you'd join me on a voyage. I've come to see if there's anything I can do." "Thanks, but I don't imagine anything can be done. They've caught me at last. That's it, I suppose." He got up stiffly and paced around the little room. "In a way, I'm glad it's over," he said. "I never had any peace, thinking they were after me, afraid to speak to anyone." The doctor talked to Luke for more than half an hour, trying to cheer him, and then he said he wanted to see Bob. We knocked on the door and were led out of Luke's cell by the policeman. "Bob," the doctor called to the bulldog, "come with me to the porch. I want to ask you something." We walked down the corridor, and the doctor continued. "Now, tell me, Bob, you saw this business happen, didn't you? You were there when the man was killed, eh?" "I was, doctor," Bob said, "and I tell you—" "All right," the doctor interrupted. "That's all I want to know for now. There isn't time for more. The trial is about to begin. Now listen, Bob. I want you to stay with me in the courtroom. And whatever I tell you to do, you do it. Don't make any scenes. Don't bite or growl, no matter what they say about Luke. Just behave quietly and answer any question I may ask you. Tell the truth. Do you understand? Very well. Do you think you'll be able to get him off, Doctor? Asked Bob. We'll see, Bob. I'm going to try a new thing. I'm not sure the judge will allow it. Now we must go into the courtroom. Remember, don't bite anyone or you'll spoil everything. The courtroom was very solemn, and it was a big, high room. The judge was seated at his desk. He was an old, handsome man in a black robe and a big wig of gray hair. Below him, at another desk, sat lawyers in white wigs. The doctor tapped me and whispered, "See those 12 men at the side? That's the jury. They decide whether or not Luke is guilty." "Look," I said, pointing, "there's Luke." "I'm going to speak to one of those men in white wigs," the doctor said. "Wait here and keep these 2 seats for us. Keep Bob with you. Hold on to his collar." The doctor disappeared into the crowded main part of the room. I saw the judge pick up a wooden hammer and knock it on his desk. Everyone stopped talking and turned to him, and then another man in a black gown stood up and read from a paper in his hand. Suddenly, the doctor was behind me with one of the men in white wigs. He introduced him as Mr. Percy Jenkins, Luke's lawyer, and said it was his job to get Luke off if he could. We shook hands. "Oh, I think it is a perfectly precious idea," the lawyer said. "Of course the dog must be admitted as a witness. He was the only one who saw the thing take place. This will stir things. A bulldog witness for defense. I do hope there are reporters present. I shall be known after this. And won't Conky be pleased?" His eyes twinkled. "Who is Conky?" I asked the doctor. "Conky is the judge, the Honorable Eustace Beauchamp Conkley." The trial began, and people kept going to the place the doctor called the witness box. The lawyers asked questions about the night of the 29th. Then the people would get down from the witness box, and others would take their place. One of the lawyers, who the doctor later told me was called the prosecutor, was a nasty-looking man, and he tried to make the hermit look as if he had always been a bad man. But most of the time, I could not keep my eyes off of Luke, who stared at the floor. He didn't show any interest until a small, dark man with wicked, watery eyes went to the witness box. Bob snarled under my chair when his man came into the courtroom. Luke's eyes blazed angrily. The man said his name was Mendoza. He had brought the police to the mine after the man, whose name was Bluebeard Bill, had been killed. After every word Mendoza spoke, I could hear Bob muttering. Both the doctor and I had hard work keeping Bob under the seat. Next, Mr. Jenkins stood before the judge. "Your Honor, I wish to introduce a new witness for the defense, Dr. John Dolittle, the naturalist. Please step into the witness box, Doctor." Excitement buzzed through the courtroom as the doctor walked to the front. Mr. Jenkins asked the doctor questions about himself. He made him answer in a loud voice so the whole courtroom could hear. "Are you prepared to swear, Dr. Dolittle, that you understand the language of dogs and you can make them understand you?" "Yes, that is so," the doctor said. "And what, might I ask," said the judge in a quiet, dignified voice, "has any of this to do with the killing of Bluebeard Bill?" "Your Honor," Mr. Jenkins said, talking in a very grand manner, "there is in this courtroom a bulldog who was the only living thing to see the man killed. With the court's permission, I would like to put that dog on the witness stand and have him questioned by Dr. John Dolittle." At first there was silence in the court, and then everyone began whispering and giggling. "I protest, Your Honor," the nasty lawyer cried, wildly waving his arms in front of the judge. Mr. Jenkins stood up again. "Your Honor will have no objection, I hope, to a demonstration by the doctor of his powers to prove that he can understand the speech of animals." A twinkle came into the old judge's eyes. He sat for a moment before answering. "No, I don't think so," he said, turning to the doctor. "Are you quite sure you can do this?" "Quite, Your Honor," said the doctor. "Very well, then," said the judge. "If you can satisfy us that you really are able to understand canine testimony, the dog shall be admitted as a witness." I protest, yelled the prosecutor. "Sit down," the judge yelled. "What animal does Your Honor wish me to talk with?" asked the doctor. "I would like you to talk to my own dog," said the judge. "Bring him in," he ordered the guard. Moments later, a great Russian wolfhound with slender legs and a shaggy coat was led into the courtroom. Now, doctor, asked the judge, did you ever see this dog before? No, Your Honor, I never saw him before. Fine, will you please ask him what I had for supper last night? He was with me and watched while I ate. The doctor and the dog started talking in signs and sounds. The doctor began to giggle and seemed to forget about the court, judge, and jury. Have you finished yet? The judge asked. It shouldn't take that long just to ask what I had for supper. Oh, no, Your Honor. But then he went on to tell what you did after supper. Never mind that, said the judge. What answer did he give you to my question? He said you had mutton chop, 2 baked potatoes, a pickled walnut, and a glass of ale. The Honorable Eustace Beauchamp Conkley turned pale. Sounds like witchcraft, he muttered. I never dreamed. And after your supper, the doctor went on, he said you went to a prize fight and then sat up playing cards until midnight. That will do, the judge interrupted. I am satisfied you can do as you say. The prisoner's dog shall be admitted as a witness. I protest, screamed the prosecutor. Your Honor. Sit down and be quiet, roared the judge. I say the dog shall be heard, but put the witness on the stand. I'm sorry, you guys. And for the first time in the history of England, a dog was put in the witness stand of Her Majesty's court. And I, Tommy Stubbins, proudly led Bob up the aisle on a signal from the doctor. He walked through the astonished crowd, past the frowning, spluttering prosecutor to the witness box, where the old bulldog sat scowling over the rail at the amazed jury. There's a lot of tongue twisters. I am so sorry. And look at this. We have another picture. So, can you see it in there? And I'll read you the caption that's on the bottom. Before I go on, maybe I'll get my tongue together. The old bulldog sat scowling over the rail at the amazed jury. The trial went quickly forward after that. Mr. Jenkins told the doctor to ask Bob what he had seen on the night of the 29th. Bob told all he knew, and the doctor turned it into English for the judge and jury. He said that on November 29th, 1824, he was with his master Luke and his partners Manuel Mendoza and William Boggs, also known as Bluebeard Bill. The 3 were searching for gold, which they discovered on the morning of the 29th. They were all very happy. Bob was suspicious of Mendoza and followed him when he asked Bluebeard Bill to go for a walk. Bob heard them arrange to kill Luke so they could get the gold and share it. At this point, the judge asked, "Where is the witness, Mendoza? Constables, see that he does not leave the court." But Mendoza had already sneaked out and was never seen in Puddleby again. Bob went on to tell how he tried to warn Luke. But Luke didn't understand dog language, so Bob decided not to let him out of his sight and stayed with him every moment of the day and night. The hole where they had found the gold was so deep that a huge bucket was used to haul the men up and down to dig. That night, Luke was hauling up Bluebeard Bill. When Mendoza saw this, he thought Luke was stealing the gold. He drew a pistol and came sneaking up behind Luke. Bob tried to warn Luke, but Luke took no notice of him. So Bob bit the master in the leg from behind. Luke was so startled that he let go of the rope and then crashed. Down went Bill to the bottom of the mine and was killed. Mendoza said that Luke had killed Bluebeard Bill and he was going to get the police. Mendoza hoped to get the whole mine for himself. Luke was afraid if Mendoza told enough lies, it would look as if he had killed Bill on purpose. While Mendoza was gone, Luke and Bob stole away and came to England, where they had been in hiding ever since. When the doctor had finished translating Bob's testimony, the excitement among the jury was incredible. The prosecutor waved his arms more wildly than ever. "Your Honor, I object that this evidence is biased. Of course the dog would not testify against his own master." "Very well, you may cross-examine. It is your duty as prosecutor to prove his evidence untrue." The lawyer looked as if he would have a fit. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Clutching his forehead, he sank into his seat. He was half carried from the courtroom, muttering, "I protest, I object, I protest." Excuse me, and here's another picture. That's when he was pulling the guy up in the well. The judge made a long speech to the jury about the law, and then the 12 jury members went into the next room, and the doctor came back to his seat leading Bob. He waited a short time, and then the courtroom fell silent as the jury members filed back to their seats. The leader of the jury stood up and turned to the judge. "Your Honor," the man said, "the jury returns a verdict of not guilty." "What does that mean?" I asked the doctor, who was standing on top of his chair dancing like a schoolboy. "It means he's free," he cried. "Luke is free." The whole courtroom went wild, but the celebration stopped suddenly as the judge stood up and walked from the courtroom. The people stood respectfully and quietly. The trial of Luke the Hermit was over. In the hush as the judge was leaving, a shriek rang out from a woman at the door. "Luke, I found you at last." "It's his wife," a woman in front of me whispered. "Hasn't seen him in 15 years, poor dear. What a lovely reunion." "Come on, Stubbins," said the doctor, taking me by the arm. "Let's get out of here for this while we can." "Are you going to speak to Luke to ask him to come on the voyage?" he asked. "It would be of no use," said the doctor. "His wife's come for him after 15 years. Let's get him home. Let's get home to tea." As we stepped out the side door, the crowd shouted, "The doctor! The doctor! The hermit would have hanged without the doctor's speech." "The people are calling for you, sir," said a man, running up after us. "I'm so sorry. I'm in a big hurry," said the doctor politely. "I have an appointment at my house. Tell Luke to make a speech." He grabbed my hand and we walked briskly away. "Oh, Lord," he muttered as we got into the open air. "Another crowd? Run up the alleyway, Stubbins." We darted through some side streets and ran until we reached the Oxenthorpe Road. In the distance, we could still hear the crowd. "3 cheers for Luke the Hermit! Hooray! 3 cheers for his dog! Hooray! 3 cheers for his wife! Hooray! 3 cheers for Dr. Dolittle! Hooray! Hooray! Hooray!" Polynesia was waiting on the front porch. "Doctor," she said, "the purple bird of paradise has arrived." "At last," he sighed. "How is Miranda?" He fumbled excitedly for his keys. "She seemed all right when she arrived, though exhausted from her long journey," Polynesia said. "But that mischief-making sparrow, Cheapside, insulted her as soon as he came into the garden, and she broke down in tears. She was ready to go back to Brazil. I had the hardest time making her stay. She's in the study. I shut Cheapside in one of your bookcases." Excuse me. The doctor frowned and walked quickly to the study. Excuse me. Dab Dab stood guarding the glass-fronted bookcases where Cheapside was heard. The noisy sparrow fluttered angrily behind the glass. In the center of the big table, perched on the inkstand, stood the most beautiful bird I have ever seen. She had a deep violet-colored breast, scarlet wings, and a long sweeping tail of gold. She was incredibly beautiful, but looked very tired. Her head was under her wing, and she swayed gently from side to side like a bird that had flown long and far. "Shh," Dab Dab whispered. "Miranda is asleep. Send Cheapside away before he does more harm. Would you like tea here or in the kitchen?" "We'll come into the kitchen when we're ready, thank you," the doctor said. "Let Cheapside out before you go, please." Dab Dab opened the bookcase. Cheapside strutted out, trying hard not to look guilty. "Cheapside, what did you say to Miranda?" the doctor demanded. "Nothing, Doc. I swear I didn't. Nothing much, anyhow. She comes swanking into the garden, turning up her nose just because she has lots of colored plumage. I don't hold with those gaudy foreigners. A London sparrow's just as good. I only said you don't belong in an English garden. You should be in a milliner's window." "You should be ashamed of yourself, Cheapside." Cheapside. "This bird has come thousands of miles only to be insulted by your nasty tongue in my garden. If she had gone before I returned, I would never have forgiven you. Leave the room now." Trying to look as if he didn't care, the sparrow hopped out of the door, and Dab Dab closed it behind him. The doctor went up to the beautiful bird and gently stroked her back. Instantly her head popped out from under her wing.